Just to begin, Kim, first, thank you so much for joining us here at Pioneer Park. We really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me out.
Yeah, of course.
Wonderful weather.
I know,
So
wonderful
thankful.
weather, finally not too hot. Let's just start by introducing yourself to our viewers. You've often been behind political campaigns, not so much at the forefront of it. So introduce yourself, a brief career background, political background, and just who you are overall.
Sure. So career-wise, I worked 10 years in the state senate as well as the supervisor's office, so for Dean Flores in the assembly and then in the senate, and then transitioned over to Michael Rubio when he became supervisor and worked 5 years, so that was my total of 10 years working there. I've also worked for Kern County Superintendent of Schools when I stepped away from politics to help raise my family, and then just last year stepped back into politics as the district director for Assemblymember Dr. Jasmeet Bains. So that spanned a good 20-something years career-wise, in between, of course, raising a family who are now adult children. So that's who I am politically. I have worked campaigns in the past, so I'm excited on this run, which is now my own campaign, having worked so hard to get other people elected. It's definitely different being on this side, but I'm energized and engaged and ready.
And you were born and raised in District 5, right? I remember you announced your candidacy on I forgot the street name, but...
Security Avenue,
yes.
So Security and Barlow. So yeah, I was born and raised there in District 5 in one of the hearts of East Bakersfield. I attended East Bakersfield High School, Cal State University, Bakersfield. So my whole life has been not just here in Kern County, but here in Bakersfield locally in District 5. And I currently just live, right by that bridge on Fairfax now, and that's my primary residence for the district. So I'm excited about this area. I'm excited to see, what change can be affected.
And so you've grown up under various supervisors for District 5, including your own opponent, Supervisor Leticia Perez. Have you seen concrete changes throughout your time living in the district?
So, things, as much as things people say they change, they pretty much remain the same. Honestly, in the area that I grew up in, the neighborhood, we've seen a lot of people move out, and criminal elements that have come in. When my kids were young, we had a person that was on probation, parole, that lived right next to us. And many times my son or my kids would come in and say that the sheriff's department was there asking for permission to search our backyard, and if they could if we can get our dogs in, because our neighbor who was younger had jumped the fence and booked it back behind our yard. And as our kids growing up, they saw that and they recognized and realized that maybe the neighborhood's not as safe as they thought it was, but they had a good childhood. It was always that instance when sheriffs would come and ask if they could access our backyard. So like I said, as much as people think things change, they really don't. They stay the same. So as far as crime and property damage, we were actually even a victim of a burglary, and our house was ransacked while our children were in school. I was out working, and my husband works, and so these people knew that we were not going to be home. So crime has been something that has been a mainstay, unfortunately, in District 5. I'm proud to have the endorsement of public safety, working together with them, see what we can do to make sure that those patrols are beefed up, and the response time to those concerns are in fact addressed. For far too long the district's been neglected. Roads that need to be redone, they get oil overlay on them, but once winter hits and the rain comes, that oil's going to be washed away. Those roads need to be planed down and redone, put asphalt back on them so that they can stay resurfaced for a while.
So as for public safety, which I know you said is a top concern, what are the concrete visions you have on upping public safety here in District 5? Because again, my question is, again, various leaders for the district have tried to tackle the issue, but if it all remains stagnant, what are you proposing that's new and that could actually offer change for the district?
One of my things that is hard to change are people's behavior. And there's a mistrust, I think, sometimes of law enforcement. So I'd like to work with law enforcement, bring some community resources back to the area, especially around Virginia and Flower Street at that substation, letting the public know that law enforcement is there to help. So that's going to be part of my plan, working for Bakersfield Police Department in conjunction with them, because now District 5 is all in Metro Bakersfield. So for me, it's all about making sure that there's a change, and I know that law enforcement is part of that, and I have a big piece of that puzzle in place with their endorsements.
And really quickly on the endorsements, I was there when you announced during a press release, press conference, there we go, that's the word, during a press conference that all these various local law enforcement agencies had endorsed you. But hours later, Sheriff Donnie Youngblood, the county's top law enforcement official, endorsed your opponent, Supervisor Leticia Perez. I just want to get your reaction to that endorsement.
Well, my reaction would be that, Donnie Youngblood is the elected official. The incumbent is an elected official, to people that understand that they can rely on each other. But I'm proud to have the endorsements of Kern Law Enforcement Association that represents over 500 members. That lets me know that those rank and files, the boots on the ground that don't sit in an office daily but are actually out in their patrol cars hitting the streets are behind me, as well as Kern Prosecutor Association. They're in the courtrooms prosecuting the criminals that are brought before for justice, as well as Kern County firefighters. I know we talked about Youngblood with regards to his endorsement, but that's one person out of about 4 or 5 associations that have put their members, because as leaders of those associations, have put their members behind me, and I'm proud to have them behind me. So in a ratio, 800 to 1,000 members to 1, I'll take those odds.
And obviously crime is often tied to homelessness. The homelessness population throughout Kern County is pretty severe. We're here at Pioneer Park. We see a lot of luggage from these homeless individuals. We see them sleeping around here on benches. So what are your plans to tackle homelessness?
Well, I'm working with Dr. Bains and the Fentanyl Task Force. Money was put on healthcare side and law enforcement side, and I think that that's going to help with some of the mental health issues that some of the homeless face. We call them unhoused individuals, and that's an unfortunate time in this economy. The other thing is maybe working with code compliance and code enforcement, as well as behavioral health and other organizations, community-based organizations, to get people into shelters, because what's happening is encampments are being cleaned up, but they're being moved from one place to another. A perfect example was an encampment that was cleaned up off of Union, right across from Kern County Superintendent Schools Transportation yard. Well, they were moved then southeast, right over by the railroad tracks. And so now you have that encampment there, which is pushed into the county. And so now you've got the county trying to deal with the same problem, probably the same people. What I think needs to happen is an encampment, if it's going to get cleaned up, getting all hands on deck, all the resources together to make sure before they move people, do you want to go to a shelter? And the other thing is space in shelters, right? Those are overcrowded in of itself, and trying to help find out what that solution is with regards to making sure that there's room availability, mental health status wise, if it's drug addiction problem, getting them into those programs that the fentanyl money helped with. So those are some of my ideas. Instead of just moving the problem from place to place, getting them a solution into some sort of treatment if they're willing. I know that there is a small percentage of people that are on the street that prefer to be on the street and may not, but I'd rather see that small percentage than what we have now.
So you are for clearing encampments?
I think that yes, because it brings an element, and it's that broken window syndrome. You get one tent and then you see another tent. When we would drive around off of 178 in the district for the member, Assemblymember Dr. Bains, and that was Caltrans right away, which we have had jurisdiction over in the state, we would just send an email and ask them to get that cleared out as soon as possible, because when we did it, we saw 1 camp, 2 camps, and they just kind of grow because word on the street gets out, and we would want to obviously see them in some sort of treatment. That's not going to be the solution for everybody, because not everybody's going to want to do that.
And on the topic of not everyone wanting to do that, the Board of Supervisors, I think it was last year, they actually voted to kind of delay the implementation of care court here in the county, because California offered counties the option to implement it by 2026 if they weren't quite ready. And the Board of Supervisors, alongside Kern Behavioral Health and Resources, actually said, look, we as a county are not ready to implement care court yet. We need more time. That is something statewide that can be seen as an additional kind of solution to homelessness. So where do you stand on care court, Kim, and do you kind of agree with the county's decision to delay the rollout of that program here?
Well, and I think if the rollout is needed, then you need to ensure that there are people and staff in place. You know, I know that contract negotiations and the understaffing and the problem with county staff right now and the caseload that they need to bump up those numbers so that they can implement programs and be ready when the state calls and say, you know, we need to implement this, and not say, oh, well, let's procrastinate and wait till the deadline to get that done. I'd rather be proactive than reactive, because if you can see a problem and head it off at the pass, that's definitely a solution that I would support, instead of waiting and be reactive and say, well, now the time is limited and we've really got to do whether we have the staffing or not. And I think that that's a problem across the board with retention of county employees. Oftentimes they're a training ground and they go off to some other place or seek another place of employment with a higher wage. And I think that that's unfortunate, because we're all being affected by inflation. Families don't want to live paycheck to paycheck, and then they deserve, you know, it used to be if you get a government job, you'd be able to own a home and do some other things. I've sat in those board meetings when I've heard workers say that they have to stand in a food line and they have to supplement now their paychecks, and I think that that's very unfortunate.
So you were a county employee before as well, and so you've experienced it firsthand, but every other candidate I've spoken to for any office always talk about county employee retention. So what are your proposals on kind of resolving that, or do you think it's even something that needs a solution, or do we somehow move forward with the staff we have at the current moment?
We can't move forward with the staff we have at the current moment. Kern County is growing, City of Bakersfield's growing, and the more people we get, the more services that are going to be needed to help people, whether they're in dire straits or whether it's to get a permit, whether it's a code compliance issue. We need to have our numbers beefed up, and unfortunately right now it's extra help positions, and the extra help positions affords the county no benefits. And you know, having raised a family of 4, we know that kids get sick. We know that they require care. And the last thing I would want to do is put any staff member or a worker in a position where they can't care for their family. That's what happens to the decimation of our oil production. You know, jobs get pulled, healthcare gets pulled, and now you have more families on a Medi-Cal system, which Department of Human Services, their caseload is probably one of the biggest in our state, and you're going to add more people to those roles. So I would rather train, retain, and make sure that they're given a good wage, that where they want to stay and where morale is high for workers, and not this, I have to go to work for, you know, pennies on the dollar.
Do you support upping wages if that's something that's necessary?
If that's something that's necessary, absolutely. You know, with Measure K that came through and public safety monies that come through, it's going to be robust. And I understand that there's a reserve and a rainy day fund. Yes, absolutely, we need something like that, especially during the, you know, deficit times that the state's going to be going through. But that doesn't mean that we have to put that on our families, that it's going to affect the economy here locally.
And because you mentioned the oil industry and the Assemblywoman, I want to ask, for people who may not be so familiar with you, again, because you are often behind the scenes, but they are aware of Assemblywoman Dr. Jasmeet Bains' kind of voting record and just what she stands for, is it pretty safe to assume that you guys are on board and kind of, you know, on the same spectrum when it comes to variety of issues?
Yeah, I would think so. You know, when I worked for Dr. Bains as their district director and in that role and capacity, you know, there are times when she takes a vote, but that's what she does for her constituency, and my values align with that, because it would be very difficult to work for someone, you know, and that's only a facade you can't sustain and keep up. So yeah, I believe in the oil industry, I believe in the agriculture industry, but I also believe in the people that work in those industries as well, because, you know, we've got agricultural workers that are out in this heat. You know, it's a beautiful day today, but when it was 112 and they're out there, you know, there's something to be said about that work ethic and what they're doing. So I think that economy we need to protect, but we also need to diversify and probably look at other areas in which, and the other thing is job training. If a person can't work or gets disabled in one of those industries, they have to be retrained. What are they going to be retrained to do? Maybe an office type of setting. Well, they're going to look at other areas besides working for the county, because they could probably get paid better somewhere else.
And let's talk a bit more about health. I remember Dr. Bains, you know, she's in support of the oil industry because she actually argues taking away those jobs, right, actually can result in more, I guess, healthcare difficulties for her constituents. Is that what you mean when you talk about health as it relates to oil and agriculture, or when you say health is a priority for me, more specifically, what does that mean and in what terms? And
For me, health is the definition of the population in regards to what we face as a community, whether it's diabetes, whether it's obesity, whether it's STIs. People don't want to talk about STIs, and we've had one of the highest rates in the valley and in the state for so long. When I worked for Assemblyman Dean Flores, the gonorrhea and chlamydia rate was so high, and it's what do you do, and it's education. People don't want to talk about it. People don't want to know about these things that go on, but they're happening, and it's affecting the community. A lot of times people don't want to, recognize and realize that whooping cough is on the rise. So those types of things is when I talk about health. Yes, health with regards to the community and the well-being of it, but then the healthcare issue side is with the jobs, and when they lose their healthcare benefits, that will impact people's health as well.
So retainment of jobs, I guess.
For healthcare to ensure the well-being of health. Like I said, I'm proactive, so preventative medicine, educating people and making sure that, if they have certain symptoms, are they pre-diabetic, are they diabetic, and trying to catch that so that those lifestyles can change before losing limbs or kidney disease or other effects that diabetes can have. Quite frankly, diabetes runs in my family. My mother, my father, and my oldest brother all had kidney disease, and they all have now passed from it. And so that's something that's very important, being a Latina, Hispanic woman, and knowing that the diabetes does play a role into our community. So I want to make sure that our community is healthy and that they have good, salud, that's health, obviously in Spanish, so that they can have a good life and that they can see their grandkids and great-grandkids. That's what I look forward to. And that's why I want to make sure that our community is as healthy as it can be. And that's why diabetes, to be honest, is at the top of the list, because, my mom and dad knew that they had it. They didn't take it quite as seriously, my dad especially, and high blood pressure was another issue. And so, just making sure that our families know, our communities know that there's the public health building that they can get help with. There's their doctor's offices and encouraging clinics that they encourage to talk to their doctors about.
And you're being proactive. I can see very well how that kind of, makes sense for health, your constituents' health. But how does that apply to your issue of, or I guess your priority of infrastructure? Because sometimes it's only until after a pothole issue occurs that we see, oh, that's an issue. Or after some homeless individuals have moved into a park that we think, oh, maybe it's not a safe place for kids anymore. So how do you be proactive when it comes to infrastructure in your district?
So with infrastructure, I can't even imagine the maintenance of roads, specifically in District 5, since that's what we're talking about. But I would like to see and hear from people where their issues are. Planing down those roads and putting a new road in, not just an oil lay that's going to be reactive again next summer, because that oil lay is going to wash out once the rain hits, and you're going to have a deeper pothole because that asphalt's going to eat back up and have a deeper issue. I'm curious to know how many claims are made for the county on potholes, but that's probably an issue that District 5 members don't know. The residents probably don't know that if they incur, damage from a pothole, that they can file a claim and get money back. And I think that would prompt people to be more proactive rather than reactive, because if you hit that, county pocketbook, then you see money being paid out on claims for people that have hit a pothole and damage caused to their tire or their rim, then maybe someone will be a little more proactive and say, you know what, we probably need to make sure that doesn't happen again.
On the topic of infrastructure, I just wanted to ask you to explain why we're here at Pioneer Park specifically, because I know Parks and Rec is another huge issue for districts. I can't talk right now. District 5 specifically.
Right. So the incumbent is touting the money that's been put in, state money that's been put in for renovations of park and infrastructure, which is good. But if there's no maintenance of the parks, if there is no park rangers, a robust park ranger program that's going to help protect that investment, then we're going to see, millions of dollars going to waste. The city of Bakersfield has a really good a park ranger program. Our family enjoyed a city park recently, and they were checking bathrooms to make sure that there was nowhere in there that needed to be. They would lock those parks in the evening at that time that they needed and open them up in the morning to make sure that they were accessible. I believe the park here, the restroom, probably there's one restroom open for the public, and then you've got homeless encampments coming in as well. And the maintenance, the grass is overgrown. So why can't District 5 residents get the same services as other areas get? And quite frankly, I think it's time for a change to see people in these neighborhoods have pride in their park. You know, dogs running loose. Dogs don't bother me quite as much anymore as, you know, walking around on the streets. But like I said, this park specifically needs to have some more care to it. And District 5 Supervisor, I think their role is to be the caretaker of that district for the constituents.
So what would you do differently from your opponent, the current incumbent, when it comes to caring for all parks?
I would be asking general services, because we don't have a Parks and Rec department. You know, back when I worked for Supervisor Michael Rubio, there was a Parks and Rec department. Bob LaRude was the director or the department head of that, and we worked closely with him. If there was a problem in the park, constituents called and said, you know what, there is a security issue, there's a homeless guy, they would send a sheriff's deputy out to get that taken care of and ask, you know, if they could move along, which is, like I said, just pushing another service along, or asking them, is there any services that we can provide for you, and making sure that we try to get this individual into some sort of housing. I miss those days. I miss those days of where you had a department of Parks and Rec that specifically handled the park's issues. Now it's under general service.
Would you push for its return, perhaps?
I would definitely push for return, and the reason why I say that, because what I saw then was just so effective. Heritage Park, there's renovations going on there. The skate park that's there, that was one of the projects that we headed up and I was in charge of with Supervisor Rubio. We got together a group of skaters from East Bakersfield, went to meet with Bakersfield East Rotary back in the day, and helped get that skate park put in there.
So that's almost 10 years in the works then.
Yeah, that was
Wow.
that was in 2000, probably 2009,
Okay.
if I'm not mistaken. So it's been a while,
Yeah.
and I think one thing people don't know is that when we grabbed that equipment, and Bob LaRude helped with this, was that those modules, they move, so that the skateboarders could have a different kind of skating environment than what's just there and what people probably think is stationary. So, but it's probably stationary now because it's been so many years. So the kids wanted one of those pour concrete ones. That was too much money, so they did get the equipment that can move, and I don't think many people understand and know that that moves. But those were exciting times, and I really enjoyed that public service portion of it, because we brought community, whether they were young, whether they were older residents, whatever needed to be, what they needed. There was a community meeting to hear from the residents. Oftentimes decisions are made outside of what the residents want, and then they're scratching their head, says, well, whose idea was that, when it didn't come from the residents. I'm about making sure that we're in where those residents are, those constituents, and asking for their opinion. What would you like to see? What do you want done? I would, walk the neighborhood and say, the park, what do you see issues with? What do you see? That's what one of my questions is when I walk door to door. What is your main concern in the community? And it varies from community to community. I was at Tyner Ranch this past weekend, and it's a city enclave in of itself, so the city of Bakersfield is in charge of it, but they're concerned about outside in the county pockets where the trash is. What's being done about the trash? Why are there roads that are not, why aren't the streets lit up? So those are questions that, even though people live in the city, they do take notice that services outside of that are being neglected.
And just a few more questions from me, Kim. When it comes to funds, whether it's county funds or state funds, even federal funds that are kind of allocated throughout District 5, are there any funds you feel like are being mismanaged or perhaps used for the wrong priorities?
I would have to look a little more closely to see where those monies would be going. That's probably not a question that I'm prepared to answer at this moment, but mismanagement of funds countywide, we depend on the CAO and the CFO to ensure that the county is made whole. They've done a tremendous job with reserves in the budget. With mismanagement, I think oftentimes staff recommendations get prioritized, and that's where supervisors need to step in, maybe take some things off consent agenda and say, hey, we need to look at this a little more. So that's where I'm coming from. I've always felt that maybe it's, my pie in the sky kind of feeling, but that residents should be a part of their government. We're a citizen government, and at this local level, so much so because a supervisor can affect so much change at this level.
What's a non-negotiable for you when you're on the Board of Supervisors fighting for certain funds for your district?
Non-negotiable with regards to
where you would ask for more funding?
I would ask for more funding countywide for substations, sheriff's department substations,
So
because
public safety,
because those substations are in neighborhoods. Mm-hmm. That's where people would go to if they would need help. And if someone goes to the substation at Virginia and Flower, the East Bakersfield substation by Kern Medical, and they need help and they think I can run here and get help and no one's available, people lose hope. People in those communities lose hope. We were at a resource fair recently, and there was very few community members that came out, and it was held at that sheriff's substation. And I thought, people don't trust to come here where they need to trust, because there's a park, there's a playground, there's a whole area that could be utilized by that East Bakersfield community, and it's not. Southeast Bakersfield as well, majority of it is the city, but when you go further south, those communities, they're looking at some growth, and they're wanting so much more, and just working with the residents and hearing and being at community meetings and hearing what those needs are, whether it's truckers running down a county road tearing it up. South Bakersfield out in the Greenfield area, once again another city area, but there's county pockets out there that they want to see the change with regards to more police presence. And that's why public safety, to be honest, just kind of rises to the top of my list. And so non-negotiable on mine would definitely be public safety and pumping up those sheriff's substations.
And Kim, for any voter, any constituent in District 5 who thinks it's time for a change when it comes to leadership for them, you are quite literally their only option. It's you and Supervisor Perez that are facing off in November. But beyond you, again, literally being the only potential different candidate, what is your pitch on why you are different from the current supervisor, on how you would be that fresh face, that fresh supervisor who actually implements change in District 5?
One, a couple of reasons. We live here. Both of us obviously have to live here to run for this. But for 12 years, nothing's changed. And that's my thing. It's time for a change. We need to move forward. And this place needs to not be stagnant anymore. What differentiates me from my opponent is that I'm not afraid to walk. I'm not afraid to roll up my sleeves and make sure things get done. I understand parks are a necessity. But when people are feeling safe or their neighborhoods aren't clean, that's a problem, and that speaks to someone's basic, needs. Can I call someone to get help? Can I make sure that I don't, drive around and there's trash dumping here? I don't mind, picking up trash. I would hold a trash community cleanup and have people come and, invite the community. It's one of the hardest things to change is behavior, and illegal dumping is a problem, especially in some of these empty lots in county pockets. I don't mind calling out people to come out and clean, and I'm not the one that's going to say, oh, go clean up that mess. I'm going to be like, come join me to clean up this mess. The other thing is, talking to constituents, walking. There's a big Spanish-speaking community out in East Bakersfield, Southeast Bakersfield, South Bakersfield, as well as our Punjab community. I don't speak Punjabi, but I know people who do, and that's a good thing. But as far as Spanish speaking, I can communicate. My Spanish skills and talking to them, hearing what they have to say and letting them know. So those are a number of things that I want to do, just a cleaner and safer 5th District. Because if we look around, if we drive around and walking around, and what people are telling me, that hasn't been the case. And if that hasn't been the case, then something does need to change, because taxpayer dollars here in the 5th District need to go to make sure that constituents know they're going in the right places.
And Kim, that's it for me. Are there any other issues, topics about your campaign that I didn't yet touch on?
No, I think we hit the gamut on everything. I just touched base back with infrastructure. I know I talked about a lot of roads and potholes, but the other thing is the lighting of the neighborhoods. Over here at Fairfax Bridge, there's probably only 3 or 4 lights on that overpass, and that needs to change. There needs to be more lights out, because when the darkness hits and criminals come out, they're going to look for those areas that are not well lit. I mean, public safety will tell you if you're parking to go shopping, park under a light or somewhere where it's well lit. Well, if you were to apply that to District 5, try finding a place that's lit so that you can feel safe. And I think that that's unfortunate. And I think that the residents, and I know that the residents of D5 deserve so much better. They deserve to feel safe, and they deserve to have clean neighborhoods.
And super quick sidebar question. I'm just curious again, because you've managed so many campaigns, right? You've helped a lot of politicians kind of present themselves to the public and interact with constituents. I'm curious, you've observed a lot of behavior from politicians. Is there any certain type of behavior that you perhaps dislike just coming from politicians that you promise not to mimic as an elected official yourself?
Yeah, so, I've worked for a lot of great politicians, elected officials. They've done a tremendous job. And I'm not saying this is anybody that I've worked for, but what I sometimes see is the photo opportunity. The photo opportunity, like, oh, here, take a picture of me doing this, or take a picture of me with a disabled student because, it's a good photo op. I promise not to do that. The pictures you'll see on my Facebook are legit, what I do, what my family goes out and helps with. And that's something that I've done for my entire career, whether it's, feeding the homeless, Thanksgiving dinners, those types of things. And if I do grab a picture, or someone grabs a picture of me, it's not because I'm like, oh, here, let me grab you real quick and let's, take that. I don't want to exploit people. That's my biggest thing. And we see politicians, I think, from the national level all the way down locally doing that. And that's something that I just feel like I wouldn't to do that, to be honest. So I wouldn't stage a photo, so to speak. If someone grabs a photo, it's in the course of what I am doing. And oftentimes it doesn't come from my family, because people would say, oh, well, she staged it and her kids grabbed that picture. And if they do and they send it to me, I'm like, thank you very much. Because I've got a whole slew of photos that I could head out, but that's one of the reasons I won't, is because I don't want to exploit it. I think people should do good because it's the right thing to do.
Very fair answer. Well, Kim, thank you so much again for your time. I appreciate you being out here, and best of luck with your campaign.
Thanks. I'm excited. We're looking forward to it. Just walking and talking.
Walking and talking.
Yeah.